This one thing is probably the most powerful tool in a cinematographer's toolkit. Sounds pretty basic, but it's also pretty easy to mess up, especially when you think you've got everything right and then something as small as it. Today, I'm gonna teach you how to take one camera and one light, and we're gonna make one crazy cinematic interview setup.
Right, so if I'm honest with you, which I am, I think the space could use some work, which brings me to my first point, lighting your surroundings. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna move some stuff around, make some space for the interview, and I'm gonna use those big old windows to my advantage. Okay. Basically setting this up as my frame. And so brings me to my second point, which is lensing. Now that I've created a space that I like that shoots into the corner, because that creates a lot more depth for a smaller space, because my living room's not that big. I want to use lensing in conjunction with that, try to create more separation between myself and the background. So what we do is we're going to shoot tighter than normal. So right now I have an 18 to 35. This is what 18 mil looks like. I'll probably shoot on a 35 mil. We're just going to zoom in. And immediately, you can see how much more blurry I'm able to make the background, especially at f1.8. Okay, so just recorded an entire piece to the camera and realized I wasn't rolling. Sometimes it happens. So what I did, God, that's so dumb. So what I did was I zoomed all the way in on the lens, went from 18 all the way up to 35, kept it at f1.8, and I'm using a variable ND on front to make sure that I can stay wide open, but also have decent exposure. What I'm also doing is exposing for the background. So right now, the subject, me, a little bit darker than what I would normally want. But what I'm doing is I'm exposing for the background. So I can roll this ND down, get like good exposure up here, right? This area is what I'm looking at. So it's not like blowing out the background. So that's at, +1 exposure according to my camera. But obviously the problem here is that the subject is quite dark. That's okay. We're lighting the space before we light the face. Okay, so now that we've got the space lit using our ambient light from our big window source, we're gonna light the face. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this light right there, I'm going to place it on this side of the chair where I'm going to be sitting as the subject. The light will be frame lit. So let's go ahead and do that. And remember, this is our only light source outside of using just the windows. This might be a little too high for the subject, so we're going to actually kind of flip it upside down, bring it down lower, see if that helps a bit. So it's not a huge difference, but it's difference enough to take a lighting setup from like good to great. This is sort of what I would want to achieve. And just power it on. So now we have our light set up. I think it looks pretty good, but I think there's something missing. I think it's a little too on the side, and I think it needs to be like more fronty, more, or what people in my industry would say, sourcey. So let's go ahead and do that. Now you can see like the light's actually coming in good here. I think I need a little bit more juice, so I'm going to turn up the light a little bit. All right, so I think that looks pretty good from a lighting standpoint. So you can see like the huge difference between like having a key light versus not having a key light. So natural light is coming in, and that's sort of the light that you see on my right shoulder. And that's sort of giving us this nice separation from the background, which we already have from lensing point of view because we're shooting wide open at 1.8. And then we add this light, it really fills in the subject in a very meaningful way, just creating a general exposure that we want. This is really get to start making some creative decisions about what you want it to look like. This I'm pretty happy with. I'm also using something called a grid. And a grid, if you didn't know, is like a way of directionalizing soft light. So it allows for control of something called spill. So without the grid, we'd be going all over the place. Another thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this little light on just to add a little bit more context and practical lighting to the scene. I'm a big proponent of using practical lights in your interview scenes just to add a little bit more of a grounded nature to what the viewer is looking at. Beautiful. Next, we're going to deal with atmosphere. So atmosphere, or fog, rain, snow, things like that, is really a handy tool if you have it for creating more separation between your subject and the background. And it's particularly valuable in places that are like really small spaces. So I have a hazer over here that I got secondhand on eBay for something like 30 or 40 bucks. I'm gonna go plug it in, warm it up, turn it on, get some atmosphere in here, and you'll see a big difference in before and after of having atmosphere. Okay, so the hazer is warmed up. It just like kicked on by itself. Apart from having a cheap one, you don't have any control over that. Anyway, so right now, I'm gonna turn it up to max. I'm not gonna let it go for very long because we just don't have a lot of space to fill. But what I am gonna do is grab an old piece of cardboard, use it as a wafter to like make it kind of fill out the space super quick. And then I'm just gonna unplug it. All right, I'm gonna waft it. See, now we're really got something going here. Really important to know that when you're using atmosphere, a little bit goes a long way. So I don't need to like fill the place up. You know when you put too much mayonnaise on a sandwich? That's what we're trying to avoid. We don't want too much mayonnaise on a sandwich. I'd say that's probably enough. So I'm just gonna pop that out, just even this out with a waft. That's probably a really good spot. So now, this is what it looks like with atmosphere in the shot versus what it looks like if you didn't have atmosphere in the shot. Just that little subtle difference that creates more depth for your subject. So that's what we're doing. It's all about these little bits and bobs. You can make a super cinematic image with one camera and one light. I gotta say, it's looking pretty good. But one of the key things to making this look amazing is the eye line. Now what you want to do is do something called short side lighting. And that is exclusively done by choosing the right place for your subject to look. So if I look this way, facing an interview over here, the light is on my open sides of the camera. This is called broadside lighting. So most of the subject is filled with light. What you want to do is something called short side lighting. So all I'm gonna do is change the position of the interviewer from here to in between the camera and the key light, which is here. It fills the shorter side of the subject's face, which is why we call it short side lighting. And that creates a lot more drama on the darker side of the face, which creates a more what we call cinematic image. This one thing is probably the most powerful tool in a cinematographer's toolkit. It's just the positioning of the subject with regards to the lights and the camera. Now it sounds pretty basic, but it's also pretty easy to mess up, especially when you think you've got everything right and then something as small as an eye line messes up everything. And you think you have to redo it all, but really all you need to do is change the perspective of the subject. So going from here, broadside, to here, short side, is a huge change that you can do as a cinematographer, and it will take your image from good to great. Okay, so we have cultivated a space that is conducive to the shot that we want. We've used our key light in the best way possible, given the space that we're shooting in. We've set our camera up in the most ideal way that we can set up for a good shot for A-roll. And we've used the lens of choice, which is my Sigma 18-35, try to get the most cinematic image that I can possibly get. And let me remind you, this is with one light, one lens, one camera, interview setup, and we only used a handful of tools. The result looks like this. Listen, dude, thanks so much for watching my video. I love it when you guys tune into these wacky things that I think up in my head. Like sometimes they're harebrained ideas, but like, hey, it's fun. Also, check the behind the scenes camera. This is the most ridiculous vlogging setup in the known universe. So if you like videos like this, prove it by liking it, share it, subscribe. I love you. Thank you. Goodbye.